Okay, so I guess I'll start. Why not? I'll be on time. So hi everyone. What I want to talk about tonight is the character. I think it's so. I want to talk about Abraham and Abraham Avinu and his connection, like about connecting to the land and different instances in his life where he was connected to the land. Um, which Abraham, it was a little bit hard to prepare because it's everything. And I obviously wasn't going to discuss his whole entire life, in, 45 minutes or whatever, however long we end up talking. But what I try to do, and I hope it'll be successful, you'll tell me at the end of the class. But what I tried to do was pick certain instances in his life, obviously not everything, but certain instances. And most of these stories are not new. They're very known. They're the beginning of the Torah, the Abraham Avinu, the stories that most of us know. But what I tried to do was take these stories and sort of weave it together in the context of how it all connected to the land. Okay. Which, like I said, it was easy / hard because with Abraham, I think it's almost everything. But I wanted to sort of stick it together contextually. So I hope it might seem like there's a few different parts, but then I hope to tie it all together at the end. That's my plan. Okay. So first thing is, and you could think, or if you want to unmute or write in the chat or answer me, when you think of the first time we meet Abraham, right? If you think, what was the first time we meet Abraham in the Torah? Right? Most, if not everyone, myself included, when I was even thinking about preparing this, was the first thing we think of is Lech Lecha, right? We think that all of a sudden, Lech Lecha, Abraham just jumps on the scene. And that is true, except for it's not true. Meaning it's true that that's the first main time we meet him, but we meet him a few psukim before that. And I'm going to share the screen to show you. Okay, we meet him a few psukim before that. So I titled this Abraham, what was a Lech Lecha and how do we do it? Also, I'm going to continue. Also, what I want to say is the whole life of Abraham, and in many ways, in all ways, if many, if not always, is a Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, meaning that his actions are ones that are modeled by us, or we learn from, or are emulated by us. And a lot of that is connected to what happens. This is not a class now, but another interesting class or a study is to look at with Mitzrayim, with the Galut in Mitzrayim, but also I think in our own lives, what we could take from his journey. So we meet Abraham a few psukim before Lech Lecha, where we see, it says, Vayikach terach et Avram. Well, he was Avram at this point. I'm going to say Abraham because it's easy for me, but in the beginning, he was Avram before God changed his name. Vayikach terach et Avram beno ve'et Lot ben Haran, ben beno ve'et Sarai, kalato, eshet Avram, beno vayitzu itam mi'ur kasdim lalechet arza Knaan vayavo ad Haran vayeshvu sham. So Terach takes Abraham and his nephew and his wife and his brother, his family, and they travel from Kasdim to Haran. And we don't really know much about them. It's in this pasuk is in the lineage of Shem, not Shem, of Shem, the son of Noah. And when it's a listing lineage, we learn about this specific family. And then we see the famous Lech Lecha pasuk, which we'll talk about in a second. And then we'll go back in a second. Then we see Vayikach Avram et Sarai ishto et Lot ben Achiv et kol rechusham asher rachashu v'et hanefesh asher asu b'charan vayitzu lalechet arsa Canaan vayavo arsa Canaan. So if you see, I put in black Vayikach, Lech Lecha, and Vayikach. And what I think is very interesting, and we'll talk about now in a minute, is first Terach is the one who does the taking, who is the leader and takes his family from one place to the other. Then we have Hashem and Abraham with Lech Lecha, and then we have after that, then Abraham is the one who does the taking, and he's the leader. So what I want to do is talk about this Lech Lecha pasuk and see what the change was. okay, that made Abraham transition from the one who was being taken and following along versus one being the one who's the leader and initiating on God's words. And just an interesting thing is, most of us, myself included, have so many midrashim that the Chachamim talk about to give us ideas of who Abraham was before we meet him, because we meet him out of the blue. And I'm not going to go into that right now, but I think that the reason for these midrashim is to try to understand where all of a sudden he comes from, and I think it's important, just as a side note, to differentiate between midrash and pshat, and really see what's actually the pshat and what's the midrash that we're learning and expanding on. But that's just a side point. Anyway, so now lech lecha, right? Go for you, for yourself, right? This double, it's like a double going. 3 places: from your land, from your birthplace, and from the house of your father. So why these places? And I'm sure you've heard a lot of different things about it. But what I want to focus on is basically these things are your comforts, okay? Your land, your homeland, your birthplace, and your parents' house, your father's house, right? And God's saying, which we're going to see, right? God's setting the way of making a brit and a connection with Abraham. And he's saying, if you want to do that, if I want to do that, then you, Abraham at this point, need to do the lech lecha. Need to develop independence from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house. And I think the message there is, in order to build a relationship with God, or anyone from that, any person for that matter, you need to take your past, allow it to build you, right? But don't get stuck in it. Like so many people, myself included sometimes, you could blame your circumstances. You could say, oh, well, it was because my family was like this, or I grew up with this type of situation, financial situation, or family situation, or health situation, or whatever other thing you want to, so to speak, blame your circumstance on. But really, the whole thing is showing here is, no, you're in control. You could do that lech lecha, devoid yourself from and proceed in building yourself and your relationships with God and other people. And it's also interesting when you look back in Bereshit, when it talks about, I don't know if I mentioned this last week, I forgot if I mentioned it, but when it talks about man being created and women being created, it says, so that when a man and woman, a man should leave his mother and his father and davak, like stick, glue, like stick to his wife. Meaning, in order to build a proper marriage, you leave your parents' house and you build this new family unit. So same to here, he's leaving the ways of the land that he grew up in, which was avodah zarah, right, which was worshiping many gods. And now he's going on this journey of monotheism, of self-discovery, of connecting to God and a relationship to God. And it's interesting because it's all connected to the land, right? The land he grew up in, the land of his fathers, and he's going to the Eretz Asher Arecha, to the land that I'm going to show you. And he doesn't know the name of the land. He doesn't know where he's going. He goes to Canaan, and God says, "This is where I want you to establish." And later, and we'll talk about in a few minutes about the Brit, and then God actually tells him the parameters of the land and all that. But right now, Abraham doesn't know, and he goes in as a free-for-all. And it's interesting because you could parallel this to Mamad Har Sinai, when the Jews are getting the Torah on Har Sinai. It says Naaseh v'nishma, right? They'll do and then they'll hear. So it's the same type of thing. I'll do it even before I hear it. I'm committing to this. It's jumping in. It's taking a leap of faith and jumping in and saying, I know I want to build this relationship. So Abraham is saying that in connection to going in the land and establishing a land and a place to build that relationship. And Bnei Israel, obviously years later, in the desert, when they get the Torah, are saying, I'm willing to commit to the terms of that relationship on the way to the land, because they're in the Midbar going to Eres Yisrael. And I think that's just a very telling point, also in relationships, and especially in marriage. I don't know, I didn't mean to be such a marriage thing, but when you're dating someone, as long as you date them, or even if, for years, and there's only so much you can know about a person until you oh, sorry, we have a visitor. My son's popping in. Until you take that leap of faith to commit to that person and say, yeah, I don't know every single thing that's going to happen in life, but I want you on my side. I want you to be with me, because you can't project every life situation you're going to go through from now till 120, you know? So the same thing here is Abraham is committing by going on this journey to the land of God. He's saying, I'm committing on this road with you, even though I don't know where it's going to turn out. And I think that's why it's so important that he doesn't know, because it's showing his commitment. So now we see, well, I'm going to jump around a little bit in his life. I'll try to make sure I put it in context. Like I'll say before, after what we're talking about, but I'm jumping around a little bit in his life, and then I want to tie it all together. By the way, before I jump to another instance, just the last pasuk here is Vayiven Sham Mizbeach LaHashem Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. So what Abraham does, the first thing he does, he gets into the land and he makes a death. He's calling out to God's name. And we see, if you read the psukim, he's spreading God's name. He's spreading ethical monotheism. He's spreading this new ideology that was not there before, because everyone was worshiping multiple gods. And this is in direct contrast. I'll see if I don't think I have psukim here, but I could just tell them to you, to what we talked about last week with Migdal Bavel, that they were Naseh Lanu Shem, right? So the opposite way of Migdal Bavel, that they chose to make this tower so they won't go out on the land, and they wanted to make themselves a name and not spread God's name, but spread God's name, but protect their own name. Abraham's doing the opposite. He's going out there, he's going through the land and calling in God's name. Then we see two instances where he leaves, one is he directly leaves the land, he goes to Mitzrayim, and one is he goes into Gerar, which is part of Israel, but ruled by another leader and not his land yet. So I'm sure if you want to look, I know for a fact, if you look, there's studies on comparing these two instances, because they're very similar, of Abraham going to Mitzrayim and dealing with Paro, and Abraham going to Gerar and dealing with Avimelech. I don't want to go into the whole intricacies of those stories specifically. I want to talk about two interesting points that I think we could learn a lot from those instances. Because there's many other classes that have done comparing those things better than I could. So I wasn't gonna bother, trying to do that. But we see, I'll give a little bit of background just so we have a context. Abraham, there's a famine. Abraham goes to Mitzrayim to get food, because they have food, and Canaan doesn't. And when he gets there on his way, before he goes in, he's scared for his life, and he's scared for his wife's life. And he makes this whole thing that Sarai, his wife, should say, "You're my sister," because they're gonna want to take you, and kill me. So they did this whole fake out type of thing. And Paro takes her, and then he gets punished, and like it's a whole. And then because of Sarai, Abraham gets a lot of riches and rewarded. And then when Paro finds out what happened, he gets very angry and sends him. Okay. And then with Gerar, I didn't bring all the psukim because it's a longer story. But basically, Avimelech, very similar storyline. He goes to Gerar. Avimelech takes Sarai, also gets punished. Abraham gets riches, then has to leave. The whole similar outline. So now, what I think is interesting to this is again, the Maseh Avot Siman Lebanim is what happens when you leave the land, or you're in a land when it's not sovereign to you, when it's not yours yet. So two main things happen. Two, three. So Abraham is scared for his life, and he always has to make up this story, and he's lying to himself, to his family. He's always looking over his back and not sure of what's going to happen, right? He's always worried, literally, for his life and what's going to happen to his family. And number two, what happens is he gets benefited because he's a smart guy and he's able to build himself up in the country. But then when the leader finds out who he really is and what his story really is, he gets sort of punished, or not punished, but sort of things don't work out so well for him. So I think, and I don't mean to get political here, but I just think it's very telling of what's going on now. I don't know if anyone's following, but there's this whole Jewish privilege thing going on over, a bunch of social media and Jewish actors, is that there's a lot of anti-Semitism rising. A bunch of people have said not great things, and there was a swastika necklace on this Shein website. There was all these things that were going on in the past couple of weeks, and there are these people that are saying, oh, but there's no such thing as anti-Semitism, it's Jewish privilege, Jews are white, it's part of white privilege, all that. And a bunch of Jewish, actors and people that are in media, they started this hashtag Jewish privilege, which was basically showing there is no Jewish privilege. We're always, we get hate, you have to be afraid for your life wherever you are, taking off your kippah even now when you're going out on the street in certain places and things like that. So to realize that Abraham sort of got that from the get-go. You're never fully secure in a land that is not yours. And you always have to find a way to cover yourself and to protect yourself. And when the ruse is up, then the ruse is up, then you get punished. You get you get caught in the act, So just interesting to think about that with Abraham. Now I want to talk about, so that was just something. So now I want to talk about his, I'm just checking the time. Yeah, we're good. I want to talk about what happens in Brit HaBetarim, because the Brit HaBetarim, which is the covenant that God makes with Abraham, is a very unique and beautiful covenant. And what happens is first of all, take note achar dvarim ha'ele, which is after these things, which is about Sodom, which I'll go back to. I know I'm not going in order, but I'm going to try to tie it up at the end, like I said. But that God makes this covenant with Abraham, and what's the catalyst for this covenant is Abraham is worried that I have no children, I have no lineage. I'm building this relationship with you. I'm building this new ideology, but how's it going to be passed on? You keep telling me things are going to be good for me, but how do I know this? How do I know if I don't have any children? At this point, he doesn't have children yet. So God promises him that he's gonna have children. That's one main part of the Brit, and he's gonna get the land. So here, hold on, where is it? Here it says and then it's very important because I just want to move this because my screen's blah blah. Okay. Vayomer Abraham yadoa teda ki geri yezracha ve'eretz lo lahem ve'avdum ve'inu otam 400 shana. So your children will be get strangers in a land and they'll be subjugated. And it's all gonna end well, and they're gonna get the land, right? But not yet. Okay. So what is this showing here, right? In here, the end. Vayomahu karat Adonai et Abraham brit lemor lazaracha natati et haaretz hazot minahar Mitzrayim ad nahar hagadol nahar Prat. So here we see God is giving him the parameters. Your children will be getting the land of from Mitzrayim until Nahar Hagadol Nahar Prat, which is Israel. The parameters are now. And actually, it's interesting. There's different studies about what exactly is biblical Israel versus Israel of Shlomo HaMelech. That's also an interesting. Just thought of now. Could be interesting. Something to, if you're into geography and archaeology and all that. That's an interesting topic to look into. Anyway, so now we see there's two things in the Brit, right? The two things in the Brit are land and children. And that's all that God tells Abraham. We never get promised mitzvot, Torah, things like that. We get promised land and children. And the reason I think is because the land is where we could build that relationship that I was talking about before with God and Abraham. You need a place to do that. And again, like I was saying with, to expand on the Abraham in Mitzrayim and the Abraham in Grad not being in his homeland, is when you don't have a land, you're always looking over your shoulder, right? You don't have that stability to build yourself properly. And it's interesting because if anyone, I was a psychology major in a former life, Maslow, if anyone knows about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a very interesting, it's when you explain it, it doesn't sound so revolutionary, but it's just a very neat and clear way of explaining this in my eyes. So he talks about, in order for a person to develop, he needs to have this hierarchy of needs, this pyramid, and the most base needs are on the bottom, obviously, and if you get those needs, you're able to go to the next one. If you get that need, you're able to, and then a goal being self-actualization. So if we look at this for a second, the base need a person needs to function, to live, is biological and physiological, right? You need food, sleep, water. You need your body to be working. You need you're able to move, to function. Then you have to have safety, right? So if you don't have food, if you're starving, you can't worry about the next thing, right? Then you have to worry about safety, right? Your security, your health, your finances, all of that. So I think that when we look at the land, and I'm not saying this in a demeaning way of the land, I think it's so important, but I think it is so important because it's a basic need of a human and of a nation, is that we need that safety of a land. You need to have a house. If you're homeless, you're not going to be able to function properly. The same way, if a nation is homeless, they can't function properly. So Abraham is saying, God is saying to Abraham, I'm giving you this land, this stability, this safety to connect and have security in order, what's the next step? Love and belonging, right? To have which is the children, right? That's the next part of it. You'll have a family, you'll have the zera, you'll have the continuity, right? And relationships and all that. And then you're able to develop your esteem, your status, your as a nation, right? And I didn't bring this pasuk in, but it talks about when the nation, the Jewish nation, Bnei Yisrael, when they're living up to par, the other nations will look at them and say, "Eze am chacham ben avon," right? Which nation is so smart like this? Because when we as a nation are able to develop these things, then we have this esteem, this respect and status among the nations because we're living as we should be. And then the ideal is a self-actualization, right? Is figuring out my role and my purpose. And as a Jew and as the Jewish nation, that purpose is told to us as tikkun olam, and being involved in bettering the world we live in. So I think that the land being that base level of safety is what, and the children, love and belonging, that the zera that God's promising to give to Abraham, is showing Abraham that if I have those things set up, then you could develop that deeper relationship and connection that you want to with me by being koreh b'shmi, right? By going around and doing, spreading the monotheism, the ethical monotheism that he is in the name of God. So I think that's really what I think Brit Ben Abetarim is all about, is giving Abraham that sense of calm that I'm gonna set you up. You know, God saying I'm gonna set you up in those pillars of necessities. And I think it's interesting before to talk about how this is not in contrast, but it is much more expansive than the Brit with Noach. Why can I move this? 1 second. There we go. The Brit with Noach. I'll just go back to that. I think I brought it in last week. I think I had it on this one. Yeah. So basically, the Brit with the Noach was very basic. It was just like, you know, go spread around the world, have children, and I won't kill you. You know. And this is such a personal. This is so personal. I'm going to give you your children. Here's the exact parameters of the land. It's a much more connected Brit. And again, personal. And one more, well, not one more, but another thing I want to talk about in the Brit Ben Abetarim is the idea of the gerim, the ger, you'll be strangers, they'll be, and it's very interesting. I read something, I forgot where I read. I think it was in Rav Torsky's book, but he talks about the fact that, and he's not the only one. I've read this other places. This is the most recent place that I've read it. Is that this question of determinism, and if God's saying they're going to be gerim in another land, and then isn't He predetermining Galut Mitzrayim? And so then how does this all work? Like, and he said basically that what God is saying here is not necessarily that there's going to be Galut Mitzrayim. He's saying the land is not yours now, and because the land is not yours now, that the children will be gerim, right? There's going to be this level of stranger instability, uncertainty, right? When you're a stranger in the land or you're a newcomer in the land, you have this vulnerability, you have this fear a little bit, right? And because of that, you could be subjugated. You're not looked at as someone who has status in the land. So God's saying that you're not getting the land now, you will get it, but you're going to live these years a lot of instability. And the way things manifested with Yosef and his brothers, it ended up being Galut Mitzrayim. but it didn't necessarily have to be. It's the same way they compare it to when Moshe talks about people that will sin in the future and they'll get punished when he talks in Devarim. It's not saying that this person's going to sin. He's saying that there's going to be people that sin. You choose whether or not that's going to be you. And the same thing here is that we don't necessarily know how the instability of not having land is going to manifest, but it will be happening. And we won't have that security. And I think that it connects a little bit to now that even though, and I mean, I'm not saying I'm very grateful to Eretz Yisrael and the government and the fact that we have the army, and even with all that, the fact that we don't have Mashiach and Beit HaMikdash, that we're living in this still not fully actualized society, I think that there's that level of fear of not knowing what the next day will bring, and these things that we still don't have this full level of security, even though we have the land on a very, very, very high level, but not the fullest actualized level. So yeah, that's what I want to say about that. And I think that the reason that we need to be getting is, as a nation, is so at a nationalistic level, we go through this lech lecha of leaving everything behind us and having self-discovery. And I want to just go back for a second, because I was talking about before Sodom, and I think this all will connect it as well, is with Sodom, it talks about Sodom. I think Sodom and Migdal Bavel are two foils to Abraham. Migdal Bavel, I already said, because they wanted to be insular. They didn't want to spread God's name. They wanted to protect themselves. And with Sodom, we see that it is a land, there's a midrash, and I think it's a very telling midrash, that it says that there was a bed in Sodom, and whoever wanted to come visit Sodom, they had to move to Sodom or live in Sodom or visit Sodom. They would lie down in this bed, and if they were too tall, they cut off their feet, and if they were too long, they were too short, they would stretch them out. And obviously that doesn't mean that they really did that, but it's showing that you had to fit the Sodom type. You had to adjust to Sodom. Sodom didn't want to adjust to you. And I think that's the exact opposite of Abraham, because Abraham, he was Mr. Accept everyone, and he was sitting outside his tent and always accepting people. And so it's the exact opposite of that, being open to diversity and learning from the diversity and not imposing onto someone else. And I think that's also a very important lesson we can learn as a nation and as Israel. I think it's very beautiful that the law of return in Israel, the ability to become a citizen and make aliyah, is anyone who's Jewish, as long as you're Jewish, as long as you're connected to the nation, you could come back. It doesn't matter what kind of religion, not religion, religious, whatever level you are. If you're Jewish, you could come have a place in this land. And I think also what's interesting about Sodom is that when we see Sodom, and in contrast to Abraham and the land, is Lot, when Lot chooses to go to Sodom, right? Abraham's nephew Lot, when he chooses to go to Sodom, he chooses to go there because it's a fertile, beautiful land, and he has cattle. He's a shepherd, and he wants to go feed his flocks over there because it had beautiful, fertile land. And now, after it was destroyed, and by the way, God, because he makes this covenant, this deed with Abraham, he's choosing to involve him in this decision and tell him about Sodom. And Abraham wants to protect the land and says, "Are you really going to do this? Are you sure? Let's make sure that it's the right decision." And he's having this conversation with God, which is like pretty crazy. To talk to God, to be able to talk to God like that, and that's obviously why he was Abraham. But what we see there is it started off as a fertile, beautiful land, and after it destroyed itself, right? For corruption from the inside, all the people were so corrupt. God destroyed it, and now it's the Dead Sea desert area that if anyone has been there or knows anything about it, nothing could grow there. It's totally barren. So it's just showing that the connection of the land's ability to produce, and this is also something I'm not going to go into so much now, but the land's ability to produce is also connected to the connection of people to God. So yeah, that's that point. And just interesting to know that is when there is problems with rain and crops in Israel, they add, it's a very big deal. They add special tefillot. In certain times there was fast. It's very evident to the people that the connection of the land and its ability to produce is connected also to people, which maybe I'll do another time, something on that, but not right now. But I want to talk about the last event in his life, which is an important event, and I hope it will tie everything together, is the purchasing of Marat HaMachpelah, the what is it in English? The Tomb of the Patriarchs, and in Hebron, and where he ultimately buries Sarah, his wife. So now what happens here? And I think, by the way, the whole story here, I think, ties into everything of Abraham's life and how he viewed the land and how he viewed God and how he thinks his children should view the land. And let's talk about that for a second. So so Sarai dies, right? And Abraham wants to go buy a burial plot. And what's interesting is he, at this point, it's past Brit Ben Abetarim, he's promised the land, but he's insisting on purchasing it and owning it. And this is a very interesting phenomenon, because you could say, why does he care if he purchases it? It's all going to be his. Why does he need to own it? And we see that Abraham had a view that the promise of the land is sort of contingent on the nations of the world accepting that promise and being okay with that promise. Hence, it wasn't actualized now. We said it's going to be actualized down the road, and that we're going to be Gerim. And Abraham was accepting that. And we see also, I said this was the last instant of his life, but another way we see that in his life is with, there's a fight between the who am I forgetting the English word, the shepherds of Lot and the shepherds of Abraham, about being able to eat from whatever land they want, because Lot's shepherds said, Abraham was promised the land. Lot's his closest relative. This was before Yitzchak was born. He's going to get the land. It's all ours. Let them eat wherever they want. And Abraham said, no, it's not. The promise is not actualized yet. We don't have the right to just do whatever we want. And then they separated Sodom, and that whole thing happened. Anyway, so now Abraham has that view. So he wants to insist on buying this land. And he goes to the Hittim, the Hittite nation, and if it talks to Ephron, and he wants to buy this certain burial plot from Ephron. And also interesting, he doesn't just want to purchase a tomb. He wants to purchase a burial plot, which we know, right, what his intention was that later generations would be buried there, which obviously they are. We have all the Avot and Imahot are buried there. So that was his intention, that continuity. And so he wants to buy it, and there's this whole back and forth, and they tell him, no, we're not. And by the way, even when he calls himself here, where is it? Oh, sorry. Hold on. Right? I'm a stranger and a resident. So even in the way he approaches himself, he knows he has this dual role, and he's not really here nor there at this point in history in his life. And they say, no, we'll give it to you as a gift. You're such an important person, and they call him Nasi Elokim, like you're a priestly figure, and in those times, priests wouldn't own land. And we even see that with the Kohanim, that they didn't have a nachala, they lived among the nation. So they said, no, you don't own it, we'll give it to you, it's a gift. He insists, he buys it, and it's his. And I think that we see is too important. Someone's off mute, you have a question? Or you just forgot to mute something? Who's not muted? That, so basically that hold on, let me go back to the screen share. That he's showing that he's accepting and showing that I'm waiting for the right time. I want to own this land. So I don't want to just get it. And this is an interesting view because it's in contrast to later views of Yehoshua when he goes and captures the land, and the kings and Melachim when they go and capture the land, and all that they don't wait to deal with the nations. I mean, they say that they tried to make a brit first and they fought, but even so, it was more of a force as opposed to making these agreements. And it's just interesting, and I'm just going to put it out there for those of you that are history people, and I'm thinking maybe I'll do something on this another time, but just food for thought. It's a very interesting thing to think about the instances in our history as a nation, our Jewish history, where we were able to get the land by approval of other nations versus when we took it by force. What do I mean? If you look at Darius's decree, I'm not going to, if whoever gets, I mean, this might be over people's head if they're not into history, but I'll just touch on it quickly. Darius's decree, when he allows during the time pre-Second Temple being built, he allows all the nations to go back into Eres Yisrael. Balfour Declaration, pre-48, when they were able to go into Eretz Yisrael, partition plan, setting up the nation, the Eretz Yisrael, and then those are all approved, so to speak, by the other nations. What happened there? Did it work out as well? And then we have also where it wasn't approved, where we have the War of Independence and the 6-Day War and things that went on there that were not approved by the other nations. And sort of just to think, or maybe I'll talk about it another time, but not now, just to put it out for food for thought of, honestly, I don't know I didn't develop it enough for myself, even of where I hold in that, do we wait for the right time? Do we take it by force? I'm not really so sure, but Abraham definitely did hold to wait for the right time. Also another interesting fact before move on from Avodat Takbela is there's, I'm going to forget now, there's 3, if Adele's here, I think you're here, Adele, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but there's 3, I'm thinking maybe 4, but definitely 3 places that were bought by, that were purchased in Tanakh, and they say, in the Chachamim say, so then the other nations couldn't argue with it, yet these places are the most argued about. One of them being here, Marat Takbela, one of them being the tomb of Yosef in Shechem, and one of them being Har HaBayit by David HaMelech, who purchased Gordon Arab Nayabusi. I feel like there's a 4th one, but I'm forgetting. But those are the 3 I remember. It might be 3 and there might be 4th I'm forgetting. And it's just interesting that even with proof not that necessarily the nations could say the Torah isn't proof, but even with, we feel that we have proof in the Torah and the Tanakh, those places are the most controversial for us. So I started off by saying Abraham lived his whole life. I mean, I could even go on more and more of every instance in his life, which I won't do, obviously, because we'll be here for a very, very long time. But Abraham had his whole life, he was connected to the land. He was in, he was out, he went on his Lech Lecha, and what does this take for us as his descendants, as Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, as what do we take from this? The first thing I think we take from this is that it's all about the Zera, it's all about our connection to him. And whoever listens to my Tefillah class, feel free to listen to it. But I'll just talk about Magen Avraham in the beginning of the Amidah. We talk about Magen Avraham, and he's our permission. The relationship we have with him, that we're his descendants, is our permission to go pray. So we have this biological connection and connection to him that we are embedded in that connection to the land. Second is, I think he does the Lech Lecha, right? Which we all have to do our own personal Lech Lecha, whether it be actually coming to Israel, whether it be in our own life of dealing with things that are holding us back, whatever they may be, certain crutches that we may say, oh, it's because of this that I'm not this, or that I'm not that, to really flush those out. By the way, interesting little tidbit about me, I made Aliyah when it was right before Shabbat Lech Lecha on, that week. So just worked out that way, did not plan it. He spreads God's name, right? He's not worried about his own name, he's worried about spreading God's name. And he realizes that the land is where self-actualization occurs, where we're building our relationship with God. And according to his view, we have to wait for the right times and not take things by force and wait till things work out in a positive way. So what I think, and just to sum up from Abraham, which is a lot of things, but really to see where in our own life, where I could balance the Lech Lecha that I need to do my connection with the land of Israel, which is our base, our homeland, it's almost who's ever married, your first apartment, however small it may be, it was, or even if it wasn't the best apartment, that you ever had, you always look at it in a good light, because you started your life with your spouse there. And the same, I think also the same way with Abraham is, with us as Jewish people, that land, that place is always ours, and we'll always look at it fondly. And even when we were not in the land and not able to be in the land, right? Right? We always were looking back to going there. And it's just so important to realize that in whatever capacity you can. And I'm not here preaching Aliyah, but I'm saying to always just find a way to connect yourself to Israel, whether it be coming or whether it be visiting. Well, not right now, you can't visit, but supporting in what way. I think it's important to realize that as Jews, we always have to connect to that. And just to get, the whole Jewish privilege thing in the media now about talking about all these, all the anti-Semitism that's going on in the world. You don't have that in Israel. You don't have to worry about going outside and hiding who you are. So I just think those are things that we could learn from Abraham. And I hope that we could do that in our own life. Sorry, yes, I see Rachel not buried there. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I was just listening about the Imahot. Rachel is not buried in Machpelah, you're right, she is not. I was just listening about the Imahot in my head, and she is not buried there because she died on the way, and she's buried outside Jerusalem. If anyone has any comments or questions or thoughts, please feel free to share. What I'm thinking to do for next week, I didn't fully decide this in my head yet, so if anyone has any suggestions, please let me know. I don't feel like it's necessary to go chronological in terms of the people in Tanakh. I was actually thinking maybe to jump to David and his connection to the land, because he's also a very interesting character in regards to that. I was thinking to maybe do that. I haven't fully decided yet, but stay tuned and hope to see you next week. Thank you all for coming, and if you have any questions or comments, please speak up or type in the chat.